Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. There have been calls for an update on Operation Branchform, and of course that's the last thing the SNP want. They don't want anyone ever talking about Branchform. But unfortunately, they have to. They have to have this update. And so they've obviously told Joe Farrell what to say. Joe Farrell was only weeks into the job, of course, this new independent, Chief Commissioner, head of Police Scotland, Chief Constable, should I say, head of Police Scotland, and they owned her within weeks, obviously, when she stole police resources in order to get home in the middle of a storm. And from that moment onwards, there's nothing she can do. She is well and truly a puppet of the SNP. So when the SNP say, we don't really want you investigating, we don't want this investigation going anywhere, let it all drag out, and eventually people will forget. And that's kind of what's happened, because the update has come out, and they've done nothing and spoken to no one. And oddly, Murrell, Beattie and Cranky have yet to have a second interview, even though it looked like for a while there'd be more charges. It does seem the direction of travel is to just let Operation Branchform wither on the vine, because nobody wants to put these people in prison for all the thievery and corruption that is evident to anyone who's been following it. Let's take a look. So here's this update. Operation Branchform officers have not spoken to Nicola Sturgeon since the arrest, as the probe continues. And of course it'll just continue and continue and continue and drag out until eventually somebody says, look, it's just not worth it anymore. Let's just stop it and let them get away with the thievery of £600,000 allegedly. Because that's all it's going to be, isn't it? They're so desperately scared. They're doing everything they can do to protect Nippy, a woman who, by any stretch of the imagination, does not need the protection any longer. She's powerless, she's finished, and yet there's still this cult of personality around her that seems willing to break every law possible in order to keep her out of jail. So the corruption charges over Branchform may well just evaporate. The murder charges over what has allegedly been done with people in care homes will just evaporate. Everything will go, and she will live a very wealthy, happy life elsewhere. And all those people whose lives have been destroyed by her policies will just have to lump it, won't they? Unless there's some other action that can be taken. And I'm just thinking Ceausescu or something like that. Anyway, Peter Murrell and Colin Beattie have also not spoken to officers in relation to fraud allegations since they were initially questioned in April last year as well. And it just stinks, doesn't it? It just stinks of a cover-up of the SNP owning the police, and it shouldn't have been Police Scotland investigating. It should have been an outside force over which the SNP have no control. Officers leading an investigation into SNP finances have not spoken to Sturgeon since her arrest last year, and neither Murrell or Beattie have also been quizzed further in relation to Branchform since being cautioned last April. The trio have all been questioned in relation to the probe, which investigating allegations of the $600,000 raised to fight a second independence referendum, which was used fraudulently. Earlier this week, complainers expressed frustration at the length of the investigation, which started in the summer of 2021. It should have been finished by now, and they should have been imprisoned. Well, they found guilty, of course, but I think if any other police force other than Police Scotland had been in charge, that would certainly have been the case. But officers have not spoken to the former SNP leader or her husband or former Nat Chief Executive Peter Murrell again. Mr Beattie, former SNP party treasurer, has also not been subject to additional questioning. What astounds me, though, is Kirsten Oswald hasn't even been questioned once, and her grubby little mitts were all over it. A source close to the investigation told the Scottish Express Sturgeon, Murrell and Beattie have only been interviewed once. Police can only detain someone for 12 hours, during which an interview under caution will take place at some point. At that point, interviewees are either charged or released because grounds for arrest no longer exist, or are released on investigative liberation, as has been the case with the SNP figures, none of whom have been charged. But the investigation is ongoing, and they can be arrested again and questioned again. And indeed, it comes here. If a person is not detained for the full 12 hours, they can be brought in again for further questioning up to the 12 hours. But the Scottish Express understands this has not happened in this instance. Further interviews could be arranged with the trio solicitors, although they could also present themselves for voluntary interview, but that is usually if they were doing so as a witness. It comes after Chief Constable Joe Farrell was called on to give a public statement on the probe, and then had to get permission from her NAT bosses, SNP bosses, to say, what do you want me to say? How would you like me to proceed with this? Because obviously she no longer has that power. She's owned, and they are the puppet masters of the police. They're already the puppet masters of the court, so why not? She said, some people who donated money have now passed away. This is one of the activists, One of the activists has said, some people who've donated money have now passed away. They will never know what happened. It needs to be resolved as quickly as possible. But of course the SNP and the police are trying not to resolve it as quickly as possible. The SNP because they don't want it resolved, and the police because they've been told not to resolve it. And that, unfortunately, is the state of affairs. Murrell was arrested on April the 5th, and the house he shares with Nick Sturgeon, as well as SNP HQ, was raided by officers. Beattie was questioned 2 weeks later, while Sturgeon, who insists she's innocent of any crimes, but she would say that, wouldn't she, was arrested on June the 11th. The investigation has shocked Scottish politics. Police are believed to have looked into allegations of burner phones and even seized a £110,000 camper van, which we know. Now, on top of this, and with regard to the burner phones with this, they're also linking this now to the burner phones with the potential corporate homicide investigation going on separately from this. But the two are now talking, so it'll be interesting to see if that is part of the reason or if separate charges will come. But I would love to see some movement on either of these things. But certainly Branchform should have finished a long time ago. Charges should have been brought. They know the money was there. They know the money was ring fenced. They know the money was given for a specific purpose. It wasn't, and if the money's not there, it's fraud. Outright fraud. And who knows about it? Those three undoubtedly know, because Murrell was in charge, and there's no way he wouldn't speak to his boss and wife. We're going to use the word wife, although it's a very lavender marriage. Won't say lover. That's a fat chance of that. But yeah, there's no way she didn't know. There's no way Beattie didn't know. There's no way Kirsten Oswald didn't know where that money went. Now they can claim it was, legitimately used. That's fine, but let them do that in a court of law, and let them stand there and tell their own people, tell the SNP supporters who gave the money willingly, yeah, you wanted it for this, but we spent it on that. And as long as you're okay with that, what's wrong? If the SNP supporters are quite happy with fraud, that's fine. If not, it's fraud, jail them. What do you do? Anyway, I shall round off there. I shall come up and we shall finish. But it is just odd, I think, that no one seems to be wanting this to come to a conclusion. Well, it's not odd at all, is it? We know they don't want it to come to a conclusion because they don't want to put Sturgeon in jail. Anyway, coming up. If Sturgeon was prosecuted for this and was in jail for this, and then they had the corporate homicide charges come up, it would look pretty bad when they're having to drag some jailbird out of jail to stand trial for another trial. Some would say, oh, wouldn't get a fair trial then. So maybe that is the reason for the delay. Maybe they want the more high-profile crime to proceed first. Possibly. Who knows? But I think either way, both should be proceeding. And if she hasn't committed both crimes, then so be it. And let's lock her up forever. This is why I always say 3 crimes and you're out. And blimey, we could get her on 3 crimes and get her away for the rest of her life, couldn't we? That'd be cracking. That'd be parties in the street. And the SNP would be finished forever. Although they may well be. But hey. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. It's not good news because it's not proceeding, but at least it's not terrible news just yet. But anyway, till next time, stay safe, stay well, definitely hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, leave a like, leave a comment, and I will speak to you lot later. Bye.